Buenas noches, gente, buenas noches. Acá estamos en otra nueva entrega de Protagonistas del Cómic, que es nuestra sexta entrega, junto al señor Mario. La verdad que esto es un placer tenerlos acá junto a Mario y ver que podemos acercarles a ustedes estas leyendas del cómic.
Leyendas, realmente leyendas.
Son leyendas del cómic. Para nosotros son leyendas del cómic que realmente son inalcanzables para nosotros desde Argentina. Así que, como sabrán muy bien, el señor Ron Frenz habla en inglés. Así que a partir de ahora vamos en inglés. Vamos a hablar en inglés. Así que vamos a hablar en inglés, así que esperen un día y medio hasta que estén los subtítulos. Let's welcome Mr. Ron Frenz.
Hello. Hi, gentlemen. How are you?
Hello, Mr. Frenz.
Hello, Mr. Frenz.
It's a truly honor to have you here. It's, as I said in the presentation, you're a legend. You're legendary.
Oh, here we go.
The legendary, one and only.
The legendary Ron Frenz.
To be with you both, and it's a privilege to be here. So I thank you very much for the opportunity. And that's my cat Sprinkles right there.
Ah, Sprinkles.
Oh, a black cat is near.
She's my best friend, and she will be sounding off occasionally during the interview, I'm sure.
So let's, if you're okay, Mario, let's begin. Can we begin with the interview? Okay. Here, people are excited. Says legends. Legendary is the least to speak about you.
Spider.
Yeah. How are you, Mr. Frenz?
I'll tell you a secret about being legendary, gentlemen. In this context, all it takes to be a legend is to show up for work. That's all I did to become a legend. I got on a book and I stuck around for a while. You know, we showed up every month for like 2.5 years on Spider-Man, or for 7 years on Thor, or for however long it was, 2 years on Thunderstrike. As long as you show up and you become a fixture in people's reading habits and everything, it becomes a wonderful privilege, and you become a part of their happy memories. You know, it's the books that you love. It's the characters that you love. It's the experience of reading the comic that you love. And we are fortunate enough to get kind of caught up in that happy memory, in that wonderful nostalgia. And then we become legendary in your minds and hearts because we were identified with all that fun you had as a child. And there is nothing better than that. Nothing better than being part of somebody's happy summer memory of childhood and their grandparents and their parents. And, you know, it's wonderful. It really is wonderful. But it's really not about us. It's about the work we do and the fact that we were just there as a part of it. And not that I don't appreciate it, not that it's not humbling, but it really is less about us and more about the work that we do.
So tell us, Ron, tell us about your beginnings in the comic industry.
Well, I've loved comics from day one. The earliest comic, I have a brother that's 3 years older, and the earliest comic we could remember would have been like 1964, which I was born in 1960. So it was way before I was reading, and it was he would have been 7. And so they were always around, and I can't remember a time when I wasn't interested in drawing. I was, always copying the newspaper strips in the newspapers, and comic books were always a part of that. That somebody, there was artwork that I could copy and enjoy. And so by the time I got to be like 6 or 7 years old, and there was the Spider-Man cartoon, and there were all these the other Saturday morning superhero cartoons, Might Tor and the Herculoids and Space Ghost and all of that. I was very much into all of that.
Yeah.
And discovered the Marvel Comics characters through the cartoons. And from the time I was 6 or 7, if you asked me what I wanted to do when I grew up, it was I wanted to grow up, I wanted to work for Marvel Comics, and I wanted to draw Spider-Man.
Mr. Frenz, sorry,
Yes.
sorry for interrupt you, but you watched all the Hanna-Barbera TV series about the Fantastic Four.
animated
animated things.
Yeah, I loved all that stuff. I mean, that was. I mean, it wasn't until later that I discovered, you know, the connecting tissue of Alex Toth and discovered his comics work and everything. But I loved superheroes from day one, and was just fascinated with them. And you know, I mean, I can remember as a child my ambition to draw Spider-Man, my ambition to be able to draw as well as the old Aquaman cartoon, the Filmation Aquaman cartoon, the Superman Aquaman Hour of Adventure, you know, the old Superman cartoons. I just loved all of that stuff and was like a sponge with it. And those were all my early goals, was to someday, you know, I actually worked in animation briefly and found that while similar, it's a very different discipline. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't something that I enjoyed as much as comics storytelling. But so from the time I was very, very young, I knew what I wanted to do. My parents, God love them, my mother especially, she understood by looking at the comics, she understood that somebody must be getting paid to do these. They're not doing them for free, you know.
Of course.
So she never treated my ambition as a pipe dream or anything. So that was very nice. And so when I was in, I took a lot of art classes, and when I was in high school, I went to a commercial art course for the last 2 years of high school, which led to a 2-year course at the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, where I had some really good instructors that made me realize that if I don't get into comics, I need to be able to broaden my ability to be able to do something else in commercial art in the eventuality that I didn't get into comics. But shortly after I graduated from the Art Institute, I showed some samples to Jim Shooter, who was then the editor-in-chief of the company. He's also from Pittsburgh. He was doing a shop appearance in my hometown because he's also from the same hometown. And I showed him my samples, and they went to the office and sat in a drawer until they needed somebody to do some fill-in work on Kesar. In the meantime, I had gotten a job at a small animation house and was feeding myself that way, still living at home with my folks. And when Marvel called, I took the work they were offering, and for, I guess, about a year or so, I was doing both. I was working at the animation studio and doing my Marvel work either in the evenings or at the animation house. My boss at the animation house was very forgiving. And if we weren't really busy at the animation house, he would let me work on my Marvel stuff there. But there were plenty of times we were busy at the animation studio, and then I knew I had to go home and produce so many pages of comics for Marvel. But so that lasted through Kesar the Savage and an issue of Conan and 2 fill-in issues of Indiana Jones and Star Wars and Marvel Team Up.
Here.
And then when I was finally offered Spider-Man is when I made the decision to go full-time into comics. And even though initially I was offered a 6-month run on Spider-Man, while John Romita Jr. went and got X-Men on schedule, and then he was going to come back and do both X-Men and Spider-Man.
Yeah.
But when you get to the point with the company where they're offering you Spider-Man, then you're figuring it's pretty safe to make the jump, and hopefully that would be, you know, full-time employment. So, and it was. So that's when I left the animation studio and worked in comics, and I'm still working in comics. I still am able to make a living drawing big, strong characters in tights, and I love them. I still love superheroes to this day. I think it's a terrific form of storytelling and wonderful stories, and so I still very much enjoy it. I'm a very, very, very lucky man.
Can I ask you a question, sir?
Go ahead.
I realized when you're telling the story, it was fun working on Caesar the Savage, this particular character.
I was a big Caesar fan. On the actual book that I worked on Caesar the Savage, if you remember, Bruce Jones and Louise Jones and Brent Anderson had kind of updated the character, and he became a very different sort of jungle hero in that he liked civilization, and I believe at the time there were people that were calling him Caesar the middle-aged accountant, because he didn't enjoy the jungle as much. Shauna was kind of keeping him in the jungle. He wanted to go to civilization. Now, when I was working on that book, I was kind of made to feel by the rest of the team like I was the only guy who loved Caesar from before, because I loved the character in the black and white stories that they did, and I loved the character. I was a big John Buscema fan, so I loved all the work that John Buscema did with the character. So when I got to the book, I realized, well, this is a very, very different character, and I would often ask the editor, Louise Jones, if we could do some stories that were basically why that character became this character. But basically, the older character was never that successful, and that's why they revamped him to begin with. So, I was basically told, I'm not sure anybody really cares, Ron, and she was probably right. She usually was. So, visually, I'm a huge Caesar fan. I love the character, and enjoyed my run on the book quite a bit.
Yes. Yeah. What about your run on Star Wars? I read that you took on the penciler duties after Walt Simonson.
Walt Simonson, yes. I followed Walt twice on Thor and on Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but they were changing things up, and Joe Duffy was becoming the writer, and she was fantastic. The partnership aspect for me, I never really had much interaction with Bruce Jones on Caesar. So working on Star Wars was really my first experience with being part of a partnership. Getting to know Joe and realizing what she was looking for, and her getting familiar with, the way I did things, so that we could really start to mesh as a team and have fun. Really, the communication between the two of us, I thought, was wonderful. And I really enjoyed that aspect. Everything I learned about mutual respect and mutual benefit to a partnership, I learned from Joe Duffy before I got to work with Tom DeFalco. So whatever I was doing right as a partner, by the time I started working with Tom, all came from Joe Duffy. And I give her all the credit in the world for that. And she's just a terrific writer, a terrific person. And I really enjoyed the work we did together. I enjoyed the comedy aspects of it. And she really knew the characters well. And I was a big Star Wars fan. I mean, Luke Skywalker has always been my favorite Star Wars character. So, it was great fun getting to work with those characters. We really didn't get to do Han Solo much because we were on the book between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. I only did like 1 or 2 issues past Return of the Jedi when Han came back. But Lando was a great replacement, and we had a lot of fun on that book. It really, that was a hard book to leave. When I was offered other work, when I was offered Spider-Man and everything, it was very hard for me to leave Star Wars because I so enjoyed working with Joe, and Louise Jones was the editor, and Danny Fingeroth was the assistant editor, although he was moving on to be the editor of Spider-Man. But it was very hard for me to leave that title.
And this part of the story that you got the chance to pencil, it was this interlude between Empire Strikes Back and The Return of the Jedi.
Exactly.
And it tells a story where they search for Han Solo. That's why you tell about you couldn't use Han Solo. Did you read the novel Shadow of the Empire that comes between?
No, I had never read any of the novels. I had read the Star Wars comic up to the point that I came on board and followed what Archie Goodwin and Walt Simonson had been doing. So I very much enjoyed all that work. But no, I didn't read any of the other novels or anything.
And as a Star Wars fan, what do you think about the last trilogy?
I haven't even seen the final film yet, so that tells you. I've only seen 2 episodes of The Mandalorian. I enjoyed it. I'm aware of what went on in The Mandalorian. I'm aware of the second season finale and stuff. And I saw the first 2 of the last trilogy, but I haven't seen the third one. But quite honestly, maybe it's because I work in the industry. Maybe it's because I just have been around as long as I've been. I'm sure I'm older than both of you gentlemen. I understand the need for the new trilogy to be for the new fans. I don't expect, after all these years, I didn't really, the prequels weren't for me. The original Star Wars, the original 3 Star Wars, they were for me. I was the right age. I loved them to death. And but the audience, you have to take into account that you're not doing. I don't expect anybody to do a cartoon series or a TV series for a 61-year-old man who still enjoys this work. I mean, they have to worry about their demographic. They have to worry about building a new audience. I'm going to be dead soon. They don't care if I'm watching or not. They want to tell to the young people. And I get it.
Mr. Frenz, that you're talking about Star Wars, and I'm a huge fan of the other thing. It was Indiana Jones. So I realized that there was a line or a saga of Indiana Jones in Marvel Comics, and I didn't know that.
I only did 2. I did 2 issues. Louise Jones was my editor on Kesar and Star Wars and the Indiana Jones 2 issues and the Conan. I did a King Conan. So all of my work in that first year or so was out of Louise Jones's office. She's now Louise Simonson, by the way. She married Walter Simonson. Yes. But anyway. So yes, it was basically because I was in Louise's office and I was fast enough and I was only doing layouts. They discovered early on that they liked my storytelling, so they wanted to use me and as more of a layout guy than a finished pencils guy, because they would pair me with people who could do finishes. And that way I could turn the job around that much faster and do that much more work. So the Indiana Jones that I did, and I was a big fan of that movie, and I loved that character just like everybody else did. Originally, it was a single issue written by David Michelinie, and I started to thumbnail it as a single issue, and there was too much story. There was just too much story there. It would have been tiny little panels on every page. And it was just too much. And I called Louise and I said, there's too much here, or there's just too much. So she went and read it again and contacted Dave Michelinie, and he broke it into 2 issues. So we got 2 issues out of the deal, which was great. And again, that was a lot of fun because he was able to get the humor that was inherent in the movies. He was able to get some of that in there too. And I enjoy anything that that keeps it entertaining. You know, I'm not a big fan of dark, gritty characters. I think that runs counter to what superheroes are supposed to be all about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to me, superheroes are about hope and doing the right thing and inspiring us regular folk to be better, you know. So I've never been a huge fan of, I mean, even when I was in my 20s in the 1980s, I enjoyed some of that work. I enjoyed some of the stuff. I enjoyed The Watchmen and things like that. But over time, as I've gotten older, I'd much rather see and read more positive portrayals of the characters. Let's put it this way: I'm not a big Zack Snyder fan at this point. nothing against anybody who is. I understand that he's a very talented gentleman, and he's got a lot of fans, very loyal fans. But it's just not my cup of tea. It's in my humble opinion, very humble opinion. It's just not what I'm interested in when it comes to superheroes. I like the color. I like it to be colorful. I like the heroes to be upbeat. I like Superman to smile. I mean, there are a lot of people that I worked with at Marvel who don't like smiling superheroes. I never understood that. I like smiling superheroes. I don't even mind if Batman smiles every once in a while, you know? So that's just me. Just my
you know what? I saw this coming from a miles away. I just knew that you were speaking about Zack Snyder.
So
it was so obvious.
I think if you're familiar with my work, then it's not a surprise that I'm not into the really dark stuff, you know. Yeah.
Yes, we understand that, and you know there's a lot of people fighting for as they doing a crusade about from the Snyder film and everything, and it's huge, and you know we have to relax. I think we have to relax. It's only a movie.
Well, I think that's very true, and I think there's plenty of room to do material for all kinds of audiences. I mean, again, just my opinion, but the idea of doing superheroes with an R rating makes no sense to me at all. I mean, I understand if it's something like The Boys that is supposed to be subversive to the form, right? But if you're dealing with Superman and Wonder Woman and Batman and those iconic characters, but you're creating something that kids can't see, that kids shouldn't see, that doesn't make any sense to me, because these characters, there's no denying that these characters were conceived and created and designed to appeal to youngsters. You know, I mean, yes, we love them as adults as well, but they're designed to. That's why they have bright, colorful costumes. That's, you know. So as I said, I like them as symbols of hope, of examples of citizenship, and you know, all that kind of thing. And to have them in a situation where kids can't appreciate them, kids can't go and appreciate them and love them and be inspired by them or be, you know, influenced by them. Then why? I mean, as an adult, are you really looking for Captain America to show you how to be a better person? If you are, you might be a little behind the curve, you know? And so I just think these characters are so useful in that way that I'd like to see them used that way more, you know?
So you enjoy the Marvel movies?
I love the Marvel movies, yeah. Yeah, I'm guilty as charged. Every single one of them, I've enjoyed to one degree or another. Yeah, yeah.
Christopher Reeve's movies also.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yes.
I was 18 when that came out, so now I was, you know, they really. I didn't. Again, I don't mind if the characters are handled a little lighter and a little more of legend. You know, things like that. I mean, I like them to be as true to the source material as possible. I'm a big fan of the source material. But I also understand the need creatively. I understand the need to depart from that sometimes for a newer audience, you know. So I think the Marvel guys pretty much have it right. You know, when I go to a movie like Captain America, the First Avenger, and I feel like they got the origin right, they got the message right. I even hello, thank you very much. The Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. And when I went to see the first Spider-Man movie, when I went to see the first Batman movie, they get the character right, they get the message right, and people, civilians, walk out of those movies understanding why comics fans have loved those characters so much for so long, right? We can walk out of those films and go, see, I told you that they're cool. and so I've enjoyed that aspect of it. I've enjoyed the idea that the Marvel films have been so successful that they've brought that universe to such a broad audience. And it's wonderful because, you know, I've loved these characters since I was a kid. So it's nice to be able to, you know, to see that other people are appreciating these characters now as well.
So, Ron, getting back to the comic industry, and from the
to get me off things that are going to make me enemies.
You know, tomorrow headlines. I hate
Ron Frenz hates Snyder.
And there's just going to be crickets because nobody's going to care. You know, Zack Snyder's answer to that will be, "Who's Ron Frenz?" And he'll be absolutely right. So,
well, after this works you mentioned, you end up on drawing Spider-Man.
I end up on Spider-Man with Tom DeFalco. He had been my editor for my brief run on Marvel Team Up. And I had already gotten to know him fairly well, and I respected his work. And so when I heard I was working with him on Spider-Man, I was thrilled. And we started having these wonderful conversations about who Peter Parker is and why he does what he does, and his supporting cast and his Aunt May and his relationships. And it was great. It was really wonderful. We really enjoyed working together. And Danny Fingeroth seemed to be happy with what we were doing. And what happened is at some point during those 6 issues, John Romita Jr. visited Danny Fingeroth's office and was talking to Danny. And Danny said, "How are things going on X-Men?" And he goes, "They're going great. Everything's fine. We're getting it on schedule and everything." And JR asked how things are going on Spider-Man. And he said, "Oh, I really like what DeFalco and friends are doing, but, you know, we're going to stick to the deal. You're still coming back in 6 issues, right?" And JR must have said to them at the time, from what Danny told me, John Romita Jr. said, "You seem to be really happy with what they're doing." And he goes, "Yeah, I am." And he said, "Well, let them have it. I have more work than I can handle on X-Men. So I'll go do X-Men. Let these guys stay on Spider-Man." And the first time I met John Romita Jr., I thanked him for my run on Spider-Man. Yeah.
And you began with this issue, the kid who collected Spider-Man.
That was the first issue I did. That was before I was hired on regular, and it was incredible. That was during the transition between Tom DeFalco as editor and Danny Fingeroth as editor. And I was working for Tom on Team Up, and he was going to give me the kid who collects Spider-Man. But when Danny took over, he wasn't sure whether Danny was going to stick with that decision or not. I could just as easily have done the wrap up of the Thunderball story, and John Romita Jr. could have done the kid who collects Spider-Man. But Danny Fingeroth decided he would give it to me as well. So it was amazing. Yeah, it was incredible. I read the script the plot by Roger Stern, and was just blown away. And I realized I just had to stay out of the way. I just had to make sure not to screw it up. And And what was interesting about it is that it was pre-McFarlane. It was pre a lot of things. So I decided to kind of do really heavy Ditko because Spider-Man was just kind of standing around through most of it. He was interacting with the kid, but he wasn't doing a lot of spidery things. So I wanted him to look like Spider-Man just standing there. So I went and researched all my old Ditko comics and did the Ditko stuff. And it was even doing like the reverse webbing on some of the shots of his mask and everything. And at the time, you know, Danny Fingeroth wasn't really comfortable with it. They weren't sure whether they were going to leave it in or not. But I gave them a lot of credit because, you know, they told Terry Austin to just ink it the way it was penciled. And Mr. Austin did a fantastic job on that. I mean, to this day, it's one of the jobs that I'm proudest of, and it's still, I think it still holds up pretty well. So yeah, that was a wonderful opportunity. But our first regular issues were 251 and 252, which were done over. Roger Stern had already plotted them before he left the title. So you know, 251 and 252 were scripted by DeFalco over Roger Stern plots, and that was wrapping up that one arc of Hobgoblin before we started in. Those were just rough sketches I did of the cover of 252 that apparently Danny Fingeroth came into possession of being editor, and I believe he handed them over to like Heritage Auctions or some silliness, and they've since been sold and everything. But yeah, those were our options. Whether or not to, we knew we wanted to do the homage to the original Spider-Man, to Amazing Fantasy 15.
Amazing Fantasy.
But it was whether or not we wanted to do Doc Connors or whether we wanted to do the two children from later in the story, and we just ultimately, of course, decided to do the kids. So.
That was a question I always had because when the story begins in issue 252, it's Spidey with Doc Connors getting to Earth, because between issue 251 and 252, it's Secret Wars.
The whole Secret Wars, yes.
The whole, and there was this thing that came up with the Mattel toys, and Mike Sick was the one who designed the black suit. And how was for you to take on that those designs and said,
we had no idea that it was going to be as big as it was. When I received the sketches, I received Xeroxes of Mike Zeck's sketches, and I thought it was a new villain. I hadn't read the plot yet, so I went, "Oh, this new villain looks cool." And they went, "That's not a new villain." And I said, "What do you mean?" Because that's Spider-Man's new suit. Now, as I told you before, I wanted to draw Spider-Man since I was like 7 years old. So my attitude was kind of like, I finally get here and Spider-Man's got a different suit, you know, that kind of thing. So that was bizarre. It was very bizarre. And it really had a lot of people a little weirded out. When it was announced that we were going to do that, they got a lot of really negative mail. And I understand why, because Spider-Man's costume is one of the best in the business. I mean, that's just genius. The original costume is just genius. So we got a lot of really negative feedback. And at one point, Jim Shooter, the editor-in-chief, who had done Secret Wars, he came into Tom DeFalco's office and he said, when are you introducing the black suit? He said 252. And he said, get rid of it 253. We're getting killed here with the mail. and Tom made the point, which was very logical and absolutely true. He said, well, wait a minute, Jim. He said, Spider-Man doesn't even get the suit until like issue 6 or 7 of Secret Wars. So we at least need to keep it in the regular book until he gets it in Secret Wars, or you're not playing fair with the fans, you know. So, and Shooter agreed to that. So if you look at the math, the month that he gets the suit in Secret Wars in the issue of Amazing Spider-Man, he gets rid of it. He gives it to the Fantastic Four because Jim Shooter was still afraid of the mail. The mail was still very negative. Now, that was back before email and everything. That was, we were still using snail mail, as they call it. And by the time we started to get rid of it, we just started getting letters about how much everybody loved the black suit. So that's why the Black Cat created a fabric version of it. And we were doing the switching back and forth for a while and everything. It's because everybody ended up, once they saw it, everybody ended up really liking it. So it was a very confusing time. But ultimately, it was one of the first times anything like that had been done. It wasn't done to bolster sales because nobody had ever done anything like that before. So we weren't sure it was going to work. And as I said, Jim Shooter was actually reacting to a lot of the negative mail, and we almost didn't keep it around very long at all. But it ended up to be a huge hit. So and it's something that I'm now associated with. So, but I had nothing to do with it. I didn't design it or anything. Mike Zeck did the original design, and Rick Leonardi, who did 253 and 254 of Amazing. He made a couple of little tweaks in the arms of the spider. He put a little extra bend in there to kind of make it look more organic, and that was his suggestion, and they went with it. So I had nothing to do with it. I was just following what they were telling me to do. So,
did you thought that this suit would become so iconic, and your cover from the 252 would be, I don't know, one of the most iconic covers? As I don't know.
At the time, I had no idea.
Full time.
I mean, we knew it sold, and we knew it sold incredibly well. It was nuts. I did a convention in Canada after it came out, and the crowds were insane, and everybody thought that if you bought this book, you'd put your kids through college with it, and it was similar to what happened with the Death of Superman. A lot of people who didn't buy comic books bought this book thinking that it was going to be worth something someday, and the crowds at this Canadian comic convention were insane. It was nuts. And the fire marshal, came in and people had to leave because there were too many people in the room, and it was nuts. So we knew it sold really well. We played it up. There was an actor, a gentleman named Scott Leva, who played Spider-Man for us at conventions and was very, very good at it. He almost played Peter Parker in a film that was being developed at that time. And he was the only one who had a black costume. They made a black suit, and it was tailored to him. And I did a few appearances with him around that time with the black suit, and it looks great. I mean, there's no denying it's a really cool design. But
so he's the one with you in the pictures.
On my Facebook page, yes, yeah. If I'm posing with a guy in a black costume, it's Scott. Yes, yeah.
It was an awesome costume.
It was a fun time. It really was. It was a lot of fun.
So continue with your run. Here's what you talk about with that this issue when he gets back the original suit.
That I was incredibly happy about. I was thrilled that he was going to be back in the regular suit. And yes, the last piece there on the right was one of the sketches that I did back in the 80s that was not used, and just within the last 2 years or so, I did it up as a finished piece based on the old sketch, just to see what it would look like. And I think it would have worked as well, but they went with what they went with at the time, and that's a lot of people's favorite cover too. Based on the old Iron Man cover. But I think that might have been Tom DeFalco's idea, to tell you the truth. But
it's very funny to say there in the cover. The original is back.
The original suit. Yeah, I was wondering what they were going to call it. But I was really glad the suit was back. I mean, when we were doing the black suit, anytime I had a chance to do a flashback of the red and blue suit, I made it as big as possible. And I tried to enjoy it as much as possible. So I was thrilled when it came back in the book. So, as much as I like the black suit, I'll never like it better than the original suit.
Ron, which cover do you prefer? The one that got published, or the one that you had sketched and never published?
Well, they're both my children, Kyle. So I'm going to say that I love them both equally.
Okay.
It's powerful. The second is very powerful. So,
well, thank you.
And here's some other iconic covers from.
Yeah, the one for 275 there, the anniversary issue. A lot of people think I did that cover. I did not do that cover. I believe it's Ed Hannigan, and inked by Joe Rubenstein, our regular inker. But I think it's been what's the word I'm looking for? Mislabeled as having been done by me, but it's not. It's not mine. The other two were definitely mine. And yeah, I loved working on Spider-Man. I was where I wanted to be. That was a dream come true for me. So I loved every minute of it. And Tom DeFalco made it a joy to work on. Our last year or so on the title, we switched editors, and Danny Fingeroth was no longer our editor, and we missed him terribly, and things didn't go as well with the other editor. So our story ended a little sooner than we wanted it to, but that doesn't take any of the joy away from the fact that it happened.
It was a 3-year run, I think.
Somewhere around there, yes, sir. Yeah, 2.5, 3 years, something. Yeah.
I really, Ron. Go ahead, Mario.
I want to ask you. This is I don't know. There is a big universe of villains in Spider-Man. So one of them is the Green Goblin. Is like the Joker for Batman. But
Sure.
You with Tom, they did another thing with the Hobgoblin, the other Goblin. So I'm very interested to know why you took that character.
Well, actually, Tom DeFalco was the editor with Roger Stern, and it was Roger Stern and John Romita Jr. actually created the Hobgoblin.
Yes.
And Tom contributed. What Tom really contributed to the Hobgoblin was keeping it a mystery. He was the one to tell Roger, let's keep it a mystery. And then Roger picked up on that and said, I'm going to keep it a mystery for one issue longer than the Green Goblin was a mystery. And then we'll tell you who was Green. And of course, Roger didn't stick around for that. And it became very convoluted. And Roger came back on decades later to do Hobgoblin Lives and all this. But I love the Hobgoblin. I love the idea of the Hobgoblin. I like moving forward. I like doing new things. DeFalco, once he became the writer, I would have loved to have done some of the classic Spider-Man villains, but Roger and JR had just done a lot of them and really, really, really well. They finally told the origin of the Vulture. They finally dealt with a lot of these characters in an incredibly well-done way. And Tom likes to create new things. He likes to invent new characters. So he told me when we started on the book together as a team, he said, let's take the opportunity to just create our own villains, and that's what we did. That's why we created Black Fox and Puma and Silver Sable and, just creating as many new concepts and new ideas as possible. And it was very gratifying that so many of them caught on with the other writers. You know, the other writers seemed to enjoy the characters as well. So that was very neat. But yeah, when we've come back to do a Spider-Man project ever since, like when we came back to do the a Spider-Man annual at one point, and Tom said, "Is there a villain you'd like to do?" And I went, "Kraven. Let's do Kraven," because I didn't get to do Kraven. or Dr. Octopus. Let's do Dr. Octopus. You know, that kind of thing. So you know, there are a lot of the classic characters. I got to do the Lizard in Untold Tales of Spider-Man. You know, so I've kind of made up for it. But I didn't. Yeah, a lot of the characters I didn't get to do during our run, I've since made up for it in various and sundry other projects. But yeah, Tom is a very much a let's create new things. Let's create new characters, and it was neat to be a part of that. You know, it was a lot of fun.
And Ron, I read that you also like so much the Hobgoblin that you help the other runs like Spectacular to set the status quo of the character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, Danny was kind of in charge of coordinating all of that, and we would have these summit meetings and everything. Everything was going very smoothly with the Hobgoblin until our editorial change. And then it became very difficult to control what was making it into different issues. Tom DeFalco had a very set idea of who he wanted the character to be. It wasn't who Roger wanted it to be. He wanted it to be Richard Fisk, the Kingpin's son. And we did the thing with Flash Thompson, which was the same as they did with Lefty Donovan, which, you know, we kept everybody guessing. And we were, you know, a lot of people thought it was going to be Ned Leeds. I kind of like the idea of it being Ned Leeds, but Tom never intended for it to be Ned Leeds. But that's what he told the editor because he was afraid the editor couldn't keep a secret. Okay, so and it turned out that the editor couldn't be trusted because then the editor went ahead and killed Ned Leeds in the Spider-Man Wolverine thing without telling us, which wouldn't have changed Tom's plans at all, except since he wasn't telling the editor that he wanted Richard Fisk to be Hobgoblin, he was putting in all these scenes that were reintroducing Richard Fisk, and since the editor didn't know why, he kept cutting those scenes. Tom didn't want to tell him, no, we need that scene in there because he's going to be the Hobgoblin. So it became this kind of a silly situation. You know, people didn't trust other people, and we were kind of chasing our own tails because we weren't able to get the story developed the way we wanted to, and it just, I mean, I was very glad all those years later that Roger came back and just did his original story, because it was nice to get all that cleaned up, because it was such a mess by the end of it. It was ridiculous.
Ron, I want to ask you a question about all the stuff about the black suit and everything. Did you work as a consultant in the Spider-Man TV series in 1994, in the animated?
No, I didn't.
Because
I was never around any of that stuff. I was always working in comics. I never did any extra work for any of the animation houses. No. Who told you that?
No. I wanted to know because it's so important the black suit in that run, in that series. So
well, I know Fox didn't, the Fox cartoon, they even did a version of the Kid Who Collects Spider-Man at one point too, didn't they? At some point they adapted that. I'll be honest with you, I never watched the Fox series. I saw the pilot, and then I never really watched the series. So I've become aware that they did do those adaptations, and I know they did Venom and they did the black suit and everything. But no, they never really I don't even think Tom DeFalco had any direct contact with any of those guys. They were working very separately, you know, obviously basing their stories off the books, but kind of doing their own thing with it. You know?
Yes.
And here's the story that you talk about when you came back with Tom, like 20.
Actually, that was Roger who wrote that, and Roger pretty much every year since that mess ended up, you know, where it was where Ned gets killed, and then Peter David came in and said Ned really was the Hobgoblin, and he got killed, and all this kind of jazz. Pretty much every year after that, Roger pitched his idea for Hobgoblin Lives, because he realized that the person that he meant for it to be, Roderick Kingsley, had never been touched on. Nobody had ever done anything with it. So every year after that, he came in and he said, I could still do you. We could make the Hobgoblin great again, you know, that kind of thing. And most editors just weren't really interested. They said, oh, let's just move forward, not backward, blah, blah, blah. Even Tom wasn't all that great. You know, he said, it's over. Let's just try to forget it and move on. But there was a team of editors, Tom Brevoort and Glenn Greenberg, who Glenn Greenberg was a huge fan of the original Hobgoblin stories. So when Roger contacted them, Glenn was very, very interested in pursuing it. So they said, okay, let's do it, Roger. Who you tell us who your original idea was, and we'll make it work. And Roger did. I mean, I thought those 3 issues, they were very self-contained. He reintroduced a lot of the characters he needed to reintroduce. I thought Peter and Mary Jane were incredibly well handled. I thought it all worked out really well. They offered it to John Romita Jr. first, and he was unable to do it. He was busy with other stuff. So they came and they offered it to me, and I went, that'd be fun. Okay, yeah, let's do it. I talked to some people on Superman to see if it was okay, and they said it was, so I went and did it. And it was, again, it was great fun. It was a lot of fun working with Roger on it. And I thought it worked really well. So, I mean, I'm sorry that it wasn't all inked by one person. Originally, they had George Perez lined up to ink it, but other work called him away, so we had to kind of drop back and punt with some inkers. But we had some very talented people working on it, and overall, I think it worked out really well, and I was proud to be a part of it.
Also, after Spider-Man, you took again the penciling duties of Walt Simonson in Thor.
On Thor, yes. After the Spider-Man job ended, I took on, I had already at some point taken on a graphic novel, and I ended up giving up the graphic novel because it wasn't working for me. I wasn't doing good work on it. I had to give it back, which didn't go over well with my editors and everything. So I wasn't sure for a while there if I was done with comics for a while. But then Ralph Macchio, who I had done a little bit of extra work for on different projects, he offered a fill-in Thor. At the same time I was working, I was offered a Superman annual by Mike Carlin. And so the fill-in Thor has led to a second fill-in Thor, which led to a regular gig on Thor, yes. Walt Simonson was leaving, Tom DeFalco was coming in as the new writer, and Sal Buscema was the artist. And it was going to be Tom and Sal, but what ended up happening was that, oh boy, now I'm starting to forget names, that's not good. The editor of Spider-Man at the time, though, came into the office and said, I'd really like to hire Sal Buscema back on Spectacular Spider-Man. Does anybody mind? And Sal was more than happy to go back to Spider-Man. So I came on to Thor with Tom, and we didn't leave for like 6 or 7 years. So yeah, that was a wonderful, I was a big Thor fan. I love John Buscema. I love Jack Kirby. So I was a big Thor fan. Tom wasn't sure he wanted to do it because he wasn't sure he could do big cosmic epics. But he proved pretty quickly he decided to dive in on the deep end and do the Celestials right up front. So, we were actually trying to get Daredevil off of Ralph Macchio. So we did the 2 Thors so we could impress him, hopefully, and see if we could do Daredevil. But he offered us Thor, and Tom said, I'm not sure I can do it. He goes, you just did 2 issues, Tom, and they were a lot of fun, so I think you can do it. So let's do it. And we ended up really enjoying it. I think Tom, he enjoys testing himself. He enjoys getting out of his comfort zone and proving to himself that he can do other things. I thought some of his storytelling on Thor was some of the best stuff he ever did. Wonderful, wonderful work.
Yeah,
I think the cover. Sorry, the cover as Avengers Assemble is magnificent. The Vision, US Agent.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. You realize though that shot of Thor is based on an old Kirby pinup that ran in the magazines and stuff. So, I mean, a lot of what I do is just trying to recapture the things that were already great about Marvel, and that was one of them. I wanted to do that cover, and then with the idea in mind that would become our new corner symbol. And one of the reasons that I always loved that as our corner symbol was because if you remember the old Marvel superhero cartoons back in the 60s, whenever they would do the title card, it was that Jack Kirby shot of Thor. And so that was always very iconic to me and very representative of the character. So that's why I wanted to recreate it and use it for our corner box. I actually used it several times. I used it right next to the title a couple of times too, just because I was such a big fan of those cartoons and everything. But that's how much those cartoons influenced me when I was a kid.
And one of the things that you also have was this. This one on the left is a great example of what you just said about Kirby. It's a totally Kirby cover of Thor.
That one, though, was not lifted off of anything. That was just me trying to channel Jack. There were plenty of times where I would do swipes, but I actually got comfortable enough kind of doing the Kirby anatomy and everything that not everything I did was a swipe, and that's actually an original shot. But it is very much in the style of those Kirby covers. Well, we were in the Living Universe, which was one of Kirby's bigger concepts, and so we got to play with all of those wonderful concepts like Galactus and Ego and all that kind of stuff. And I just love that.
All the cosmic elements of the Marvel universe.
High evolutionary. Those stories involved the High Evolutionary and the New Men, and we just loved going to the original Lee Kirby stories and having fun with it. And of course, we introduced Eric Masterson early in our run, knowing, because of the initial conversations I had with Tom, were about bringing back a human identity, a human connection for Thor once he was back on Earth. And so we introduced Eric in our second issue, but it was still a couple of years before we wanted the readers to get to know Eric and to like Eric before we actually merged them in the one issue we had up on the screen there. What was it, 407 or something? I forget what it was. That one right there in the middle.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was all planned, and Tom, as I said, Tom is a very intricate writer. He has long range plans and short range plans, and he lets things happen in the fullness of time. But by the time we did what we did with Eric, the readers liked him. The readers cared about Eric and wanted him to be okay. So we didn't have a lot of pushback about it. You know, we didn't have a lot of people hate the idea of them merging. So it was, you know, it was very, very smart of Tom to do it the way he did it.
And then, Ron, the 90s came.
The 90s came. Yes, they did.
They came over and said, it's not Thor, it's Thunderstrike.
Well, and that was not initially our idea either. What ended up happening was we did the thing where Eric became Thor and had to be fill-in for the original Thor. That was something that was DeFalco's idea, and we did that for a couple of years. And it was all very planned out with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And what ended up happening was that the fans liked Eric so much that the sales department came to Tom DeFalco and said, we understand you're wrapping up the storyline with Eric Masterson. And he said, yeah, that's true. And they said, well, we were thinking about giving Eric his own title. And Tom said, as what? What would that be? And the sales department said, that's what you get to figure out. So we did not pitch Thunderstrike. They came to us and said, decide what you want to do. You know, we didn't know whether it was going to be like a journey into mystery thing where Eric would stay Thor on Earth, and then we'd do, you know, and then Thor would just go back to Asgard and be the king of Asgard. That we weren't sure at first. So we started playing with ideas, and that's where Thunderstrike came from. I mean, we just, you know, Walt had kind of opened things up for Odin making another weapon by doing Stormbreaker and everything. So we decided to go that direction and kind of embrace what the fans liked about Eric as Thor, which was the contemporary speech and the more contemporary outfit. And yeah, it was the 90s. So we went full on 90s with the leather vest and all that kind of jazz. And I was, those sketches of the Mace were what I contributed. And it was Pat Olive, who I shared studio space with at the time, who suggested that he liked the triangular head, but he said, take one of the faces and put a strike plate on it, like on Mjolnir. You know, put the extra face on it, and it worked great. So that's what we ended up doing. But you know, the costume kind of came from my own ideas, and of course, it's heavily based on his Thor costume when he was standing in for Thor, and the leather jacket and everything was very much a '90s thing. So you know, we just kind of took a shot. And it worked. I mean, the book was very popular. The book, it wasn't canceled because of low sales. It was canceled because Marvel was owned by a particular group of people at that time, and they decided that if you canceled half the line, the half that was left would sell twice as well. So books like Thunderstrike and War Machine and Force Works and, you know, a lot of the spin-off titles were all canceled without any real hope of reprieve or anything, but none of it was based on sales. They were all selling just fine. So it was a shame. I mean, you know, and I was under contract at Marvel at the time, and Thunderstrike was canceled, so I had no work. So Mark Grunwald, who is a gentleman I'm sure you've heard of, was the executive editor, and he was trying desperately to make things work and to help out. But the company was starting to splinter, and people were being fired like crazy, and they just didn't have work for me. And you know, Mark tried to find work for me and couldn't, and that's how I ended up over at DC doing Superman.
Ron, before the DC era, I want to ask you a question, and Carl and I wanted to ask you, because in the next Thor movie, the rumors are that Thunderstrike will be in the movie.
I don't know. I know nothing about it. Frankly, I think that's going to be a joke. I think they're going to make a joke where Thor borrowed one of Star-Lord's jackets, and his arms were so big he had to tear the sleeves off because Star-Lord has puny arms. And Star-Lord, I'm like, puny, that kind of thing. That's what I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be a one-joke thing. But I don't know anything about it. I've seen people guessing that maybe they'll even introduce the Thunderstrike mace the way they introduced Stormbreaker, that kind of thing. I have no idea. They don't call us about that kind of stuff. So I will be there, and hopefully by then I'll be in a theater like everybody else, and we'll see what happens.
I would love to see Thor being Thunderstrike because it's like a cool name, and with the Guardians of the Galaxy and Star-Lord and all that stuff between them, it could be. I'm Thunderstrike, man. I know Star-Lord.
I really don't know. I mean, from the very first Thor movie, since they used Eric as the name for his friend Eric Selvig, I kind of went, well, then they're never going to do Eric Masterson, that kind of thing. Now, whether or not they do the mace, I have no idea. That's a possibility, I guess. With Jane becoming, Thor, I don't know. It's crazy, and I'm not, and I don't know for sure that they didn't do it as a little nod to Thunderstrike. I have no idea what those guys know and what they don't know, as far as the comics, So maybe it is a little, a little nod to Thunderstrike, or maybe it's just a complete coincidence. I really don't know.
So, as you said, you moved to DC, and you got to play with another one great character that was Superman, and got to play with another costume change character.
Yeah, and again, as I said, the black costume was not my idea. Even changing Thor's costume was not my idea. That was Tom's idea. So I end up over on Superman, and they decide that they're going to do this storyline where Superman's powers change. And they told all the artists, all the different pencilers for the different Superman titles, they said Superman's powers are going to be electrically based, and he's going to be wearing a containment suit. And if you want to work on a design, feel free. Now, I was the new guy, so I wasn't really planning on doing anything with it. But one night after work, I had a couple of thoughts, so I put them on paper and I played with them a little bit. And I went, okay, that might be worth sending in. So I did a sketch, I sent it in, and they ended up picking my design. I think one of the reasons they picked my design was because I was one of the only ones who played with the S and made it look like a lightning bolt, which was something they could use for like T-shirts, and they made like a watch that had the symbol on it, things like that. So I think that's one of the reasons they picked mine. I think the other reason they picked mine was that the colorist, Glenn Whitmore, had been wanting for years to do a new version of the old story, Superman Red, Superman Blue. So the fact that my design was all blue opened the door for doing a Superman that was all red, and he would finally get a chance to do Superman Red, Superman Blue. So those were the two reasons I think they picked my design. And yes, so once again, through no plan of my own, I get stuck with redesigning a character, again, it wasn't my idea. I just happened to be sitting in the getaway car with the engine running, so everybody blames me.
Here, one of the subscribers says, "The curse of the alternative suits."
Yes, exactly. That's my curse. I didn't ask for it. I didn't come in. I wasn't the one that came in with the idea. I just had to deal with it. I'm the one who has to live with the reputation now of being the guy who changes the suits. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was a bold move because the suit, I really like it. It was for the time being, it was amazing, and it was totally different from what we saw after the death of Superman. Because one of the things that got me impressed from the death of Superman was that when he came back, it was with the black suit.
Right.
It was the black suit with the brilliant X. It was great, and he didn't kept the suit, so he came back to the blue and red with the mullets. And then when everything started with the power, I think this started with Final Night, when Superman lost his powers.
Yes.
And his powers began to transform into something else, and end up in this Superman 123.
Yeah, and the different writers all seem to have a different idea of why his powers changed and how his powers changed. And after we did the split with Superman Red and Blue, I stuck around until that all wrapped up and everything. And then when they decided they wanted to do something with the suit, they gave me the opportunity to try to develop it, and we did that. We ended up with Strange Visitor, the what was it, a 4 or 5 issue series of that introduced Strange Visitor, and it never really went anywhere. Yes, exactly. And unfortunately, it didn't go anywhere. But that again was fun, and it wasn't supposed to take me off of Superman, but by that point, they had already hired a bunch of new people to come on to Superman and do the next era of Superman. So I ended up having to go back to Marvel to do MC2. We ended up doing Spidergirl and developing the rest of the MC2 line. So I've been, again, very blessed in that whenever a job wraps up, or whenever situation changes, or whenever I lose a job, I've been very fortunate to find some place to land, to have some other opportunity present itself, so that I'm able to stay busy and to stay eating. So
here I got some of the artwork from Superman. These are interiors from the first one. I had to put the Kyle Rayner you drew. I had it.
Of course.
It's amazing. I like it.
I love it.
You got a design so I don't know how to say it, but it's so characteristical that it's impossible that you don't realize. I don't know. You don't realize it's you that's drawing the character. For example, it's something that I really like. It's what I call the Kirby mouth. You use that triangle type mouth that you draw on characters, that it's like the Kirby stuff.
I understand. No, I learned from Kirby and from Romita and from the two Buscema brothers. I try to keep that style alive as much as possible. What was really kind of bizarre too is that the inker I worked with on Spider-Man was the same inker I was working with on Superman. Bill Rubenstein and I were reunited on the Superman title, and he was very important to that Superman book because, as I said, it was a tough gig. You really had to keep moving quickly from issue to issue because the next guy was waiting for your layouts, so he could do the next issue and the next issue and the next issue. So it was a very difficult gig And I have a lot of respect for the gentlemen that were able to do it for any period of time. The Jerry Ordways and the Kerry Gambles and the Brett Breedings and the Dan Jurgens. It's incredible that they were able to do it for as long as they did. Yeah, that was my first Superman cover, and the Strange Visitor cover. That's actually was the original art. They just put a big patch over Superman and decided that they wanted it to look more like the issue where he first got the blue suit and take Superman out of it. So.
I think I really liked it. Really like it, this one, because it was like that kind of the breakthrough covers when you see the cover and another character comes in and says, "Hey, what is this?"
No, yeah, I agree. I would have liked to have seen it. I like the fact that he's being lit by her lightning and everything. So I would have liked to have seen it colored up that way. But, well, it was not to be. What can I tell you? The editors have the final say.
And also,
Ron, I want to ask you
one more thing. One more thing, Mario, and that's it. And this one that it's a typical John Byrne style.
Yes,
pose,
we were trying to recreate that last shot by John Byrne. Yes, where he's leaving the farmhouse. Absolutely, yeah.
When Superman says there's no new Superman in town, and the blue suit appears, it's awesome. Awesome. Go ahead, Mario. Sorry.
It was a real challenge drawing Superman for you.
Not really. I mean, as much as I've always been a Marvel guy, Superman has always been a big part of my life. I've always loved Superman, and I was a huge fan of Bruce Timm's Superman cartoon, the Superman Adventures. So I was still very plugged into the character. Brett Breeding and I have been friends for years since we worked together back at Marvel. So I was following the death of Superman like everybody else was, and was keeping an eye on the books and reading the books and enjoying the work that they were doing. So, I was all up to speed when I was offered the chance to work on the books. I was all up to speed on that kind of thing. So it was a great honor. I'm one of those guys that I completely believe that Superman is the granddaddy of us all, and so it was a great honor to be asked to work on Superman. And the time I spent there, I'm very humbled by it, very proud of it, and I wouldn't have changed it for the world. It was a great opportunity, and I light a candle to Mike Carlin every chance I get. Because he saved when Marvel had no work for me. Mike Carlin saved Mike Carlin and Superman rescued me.
Did they call him the Great Carlini, or it was just in comics?
That was actually some of the stuff they were doing before, but by the time I got there, Mike wasn't the hands-on editor of the books. He had been promoted to some kind of an executive position. But so I was working with two other gentlemen who were desperately trying to do the same kind of job that Mike Carlin had done for years, to varying degrees of success, because he was a very, very, very tough act to follow. So.
And I wanted to ask you, how was being part of the Superman wedding? Because you were in the wedding.
Yes, we all were featured at the wedding. Yes, we all sent either photo reference or a sketch of ourselves or something. There I am.
Here you are.
It was a beautiful service. It was a lovely ceremony, and yes, you should have been there. It was just wonderful.
And Jerry Orway here looking at the camera.
That was another thing, though, that I was sharing studio space with Mr. Pat Olive, who is an illustrator of great renown himself, working on Untold Tales of Spider-Man and all the different books that he's worked on. And he actually did a sketch of me that is what we sent to DC to use for that. So that's actually kind of based on a sketch that Pat Olive did of me to show these people what I looked like. Instead of a photograph, we just sent a drawing. So.
It's a great homage because also the priest is Jerry Siegel. I think the priest was Jerry Siegel who married Superman Lois.
Back in the day, yeah. I mean, that was the original plan, and the publishers said, well, maybe we should hold off on that. I don't think they meant to hold off 75 years, but they did hold off, yeah.
And here we get back to the MC2, where you got the chance to work on this What If Spider-Man, introducing Mayday Parker.
Yeah. Again, it was Tom's original idea, and he asked me if I was interested in working with him, and I'm always interested in working with Tom. So we developed the idea together, and it was great fun. That issue I think really holds up well, and then to find out that it was going to launch an entire line of books was just incredibly gratifying. And when we found out when we decided that Thunderstrike, that Kevin was going to be Thunderstrike in A Next, I decided, well, I have to go do that. I have to do A Next. And we knew that Pat Olive would do a fantastic job on Spidergirl. So that's the way we went. And, that was incredible fun. That first year where Tom was editing the books and writing the books was just an incredibly creative time and a lot of fun putting together new ideas and working with the Marvel characters again was just great. So I loved it. Loved every minute of it.
I'm also a fan of Peter Parker's goatee.
Yes.
I really like it. It was cool to see him like this.
One of the places that came from, Kyle, was when Pat Olive was doing Untold Tales of Spider-Man. They did a character, and I forget what the character's name was, but he called himself the Terrier, I believe. He was like a hitman for the mob or something, and he was supposed to be an old boyfriend of Betty Brant's. And the writer asked that he have a resemblance to Peter Parker, not look like a double or anything, but have some kind of a resemblance to Pete that, Betty was kind of keying into. Well, that's why Betty was attracted to Pete, that kind of thing. So what Pat ended up doing was using himself as a model for that character, for the Terrier, because Pat kind of looks like Peter Parker. He has short cropped hair, but he was wearing a goatee at the time. So he gave this character, the Terrier, he gave the character his hair and a brown goatee. So when I was developing what older Peter Parker should look like, I was looking at Pat, and he had started to gray. He had a little bit of a gray shock here.
Yeah.
And I went, wow, that's cool. And I can use the hair, I can use the goatee. So my older Peter Parker was very much based on Pat Olive. And, I didn't make Pete look more like Pat, but I made Pat look more like Pete. And we went with that for the older Peter Parker, yes.
We got some artwork here from the issues. And you gotta get back to the Hobgoblin because people love Hobgoblin.
Yeah, that was
Hobgoblin returns.
And again, it was crazy because, well, for one thing, I wasn't expecting to get handed the book when Pat left. When Pat finally left, he was offered some opportunities that he really couldn't turn down. And Spider-Girl was supposedly canceled at that point. It was one of the many times that Spider-Girl was canceled. And Pat was going to leave to go do this new project. But he was going to leave like the last 4 to 6 issues were up for grabs, if that. I don't even think it was that many. But and I was surprised because they asked me to go ahead and do them. And I said, well, that makes sense. I was looking for work and I was happy to do them. And then it got uncanceled again. And I said, well, you're bringing Pat back, right? And they said, no, well, Pat, he's working on other projects now. Everything, he's fine. And I went, okay. So I ended up on Spidergirl. And Pat ended up on a whole bunch of other different projects. But it took a while for me to kind of get out of Pat's shadow. But I ended up really enjoying working on the title with Tom and everything. And fell in love with the character myself. And really enjoyed that run, yeah. And
you know,
what we ended up doing though is we're going to do this one story that dealt with the fashion industry, and the character that we had from the fashion industry was Roderick Kingsley's brother Daniel Kingsley. So we were going to use Daniel Kingsley as this fashion person, and we threw in a flashback panel of the Hobgoblin, and the fans went nuts. They went nuts. Like, oh, you're going to bring in the Hobgoblin. You're going to bring in the Hobgoblin. We weren't planning on bringing in the Hobgoblin at all. But then at one point, as was often the case with Spidergirl, the editor called and said, you know, we need a shot in the arm. We need to do something big to get some attention. And Tom and I got on the phone and started talking. And I said, I don't know, Tom, maybe we should let's just do Hobgoblin. Let's make a big deal about Hobgoblin. And he went, yeah, that's not a bad idea. So we did those Hobgoblin stories and made Hobgoblin a big badass who came to Mayday's nice little neighborhood and did some real damage for a while there, you know. So that was a lot of fun. It was kind of neat dealing with Roderick Kingsley as Roger had conceived him and as Roger had left him. That, you know, it was pretty cool. We enjoyed those stories. We enjoyed that quite a bit.
Ron, why do you think that the people love so much the Hobgoblin instead of the Green Goblin? Because the Green Goblin, it's okay, but don't ask me why. Because when I read something with the Green Goblin, I said it's okay. He's a badass. He's so smart. Or Norman Osborn, but the Hobgoblin has this mystery of the identity and this whole mystery surrounding him that it's so attracting to read, so appealing to read. That
I think just the fact that the Hobgoblin was redesigned for the 80s. I think John Romita Jr.'s design with the hood. I think it just works better for the older fans than the Green Goblin. I mean, the Green Goblin's original design, I really like the original design of the Green Goblin. But if you look back at the way Steve Ditko drew the Green Goblin, he had a lot of blacks on his costume. The headpiece was different. The eyes, he had more, he had darker circles around the eyes. And there was a lot being done differently than what John Romita Sr. did when he took over the character. And they lost the blacks on the costume, and it went from purple to kind of like a weird sort of pinkish color and everything. And I think a lot of fans, that's what they think of when they think of the Green Goblin. They think of the more pasteurized version of him as he was around for longer and longer. And you know, frankly, I did a variant cover for, what issue was it? Was it issue 700 or 800 or something, with the Red Goblin, where they finally, I really truly hope that Norman Osborn is dead. Norman Osborn should have stayed dead after he killed Gwenby. You know, that when he got the bat flyer through the chest, that should have been the end of him. When they brought him back and made him Lex Luthor, and you know, he became the the architect of everything bad that ever happened to Peter Parker and all this. It's too much. I think people, I think Norman Osborn has been overexposed. I think he's been overdone. And I think that's one of the reasons why people like the Hobgoblin, because it was this, it kept you connected to that history, but it was a fresher take on the character. And he wasn't crazy. There's only so much you can do with crazy. How I never read the stories, so this is probably very unfair of me. But at one point, Norman Osborn was running S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah.
Is out of his mind. I did stories where he had to have a patch with medicine being fed into his system to keep himself sane at all, and they're letting him run S.H.I.E.L.D.? Come on.
Or wearing the Iron
Patriot
armor, or being the head of the Dark Avengers.
How does he get away with that? I mean, I don't know how he gets away with that. I really don't. I mean, I've handled Norman a few times in different stories, but I really do. I think the fact that Hobgoblin wasn't crazy, he was just evil. He was just mean. I think people respond to that. I have people all the time. I think they really love the hood, because a lot of people, when you just do the deep shadow and you just see the red eyes coming out of the hood, it's a great look. It looks very mysterious and it looks very menacing. And I think he just has an overall cooler look than the Goblin. And I really like the Goblin design, but if I had to pick one, I'd probably go with the Hobgoblin too. That's all I can guess. I don't know. I do a lot of Hobgoblin commissions. That's all I know.
The most requested, you said.
He's very, very popular with commissions. It's got to be a dead heat between Hobgoblin and Black Costume Spider-Man, and I do a lot of Hobgoblin versus Black Costume Spider-Man. Yeah.
Then
if you go to my page on CatskillComics.com and look at my gallery, you will see a lot of Hobgoblin and you will see a lot of the Black Costume Spider-Man.
I put some on the show. I put some on the show.
Ron, if you have a chance to come to Argentina, I wish you can draw me a Norman Osborn.
That would be my pleasure. That would be a very different thing. Yes, thank you.
Iron Patriot.
Iron Patriot. Norman Osborn.
No, he's a fun character to do. I mean, I actually did what was it called? Revenge of the Green Goblin. I did a series, like a 3-issue series with Roger Stern that handled Norman. We did Norman briefly in the one Spider-Man annual we did. And we actually had a version of Norman show up in Spidergirl. Norman was long dead, but they did this programming to Peter Parker where they, Norman was inside his head. So we got to see Norman a little bit inside.
Yeah, something that I think it was used later with Octopus and Spider-Man.
Yeah, it would have been kind of similar to that. Yes, we did it. Yeah. We actually did it first, though.
Yeah, you did it first. That's why I tell him this, because it sounds pretty similar to something Slott did.
Well, it was something that they did in that when we did that 3-issue Revenge of the Green Goblin story. There was this whole idea going on where he was through psychoactive drugs and stuff. He was turning Peter Parker into his heir. And when the new team, when a different team came in to do the final chapter of that story, they didn't pick up on that at all. So after all those years on Spider-Girl, I wanted to do something where Norman, uploaded his consciousness, uploaded his engrams into a computer, and he actually had chosen Peter as his heir. So we had this cult of the Goblin. There used to be the Scryers, they kidnap Pete, and they hook him up to this machine, and basically Norman Osborn lives again through Peter Parker, but Mayday helps him exorcise Norman from inside his skull. But it was fun. It was a fun story, and you know, I got to do the Green Goblin a little bit and different versions of the Green Goblin and Norman, and finally tried to do the last Norman Osborn story. And I don't know, they may have brought him back already. I don't know. I'm hoping the Red Goblin was the last of Norman Osborn. I really wish they would just come up with some new idea instead of bringing Norman back all the time. You know, it's time. Let Norman rest. Please.
Ron, recently you have a project with Sal Buscema called, let me put it on screen.
The Blue Baron.
Blue Baron.
Blue Baron.
What can you tell us about this project?
It was a publisher out of California here in the United States, and he approached Sal Buscema about working on it with him. And at that point, Sal was pretty much done with penciling. And he said, if you get Ron Frenz, I'll be happy to ink it. So I worked with this gentleman, Darren Henry, and we developed a whole cast of new superheroes and supervillains and created an entire world of new superheroes. And they've been available in limited release and through mail order, but this August, they are going to be available through Diamond Distribution in the United States.
Cool.
So hopefully they'll be much more available. We'll have, there's 3 issues of Blue Baron that are already out, several issues of Startup, several issues of other titles. But we're also, the issue we just wrapped up that'll be part of the big launch in August is the Heroes Union, which is the team that the Blue Baron put together back in the 30s. That is basically our universe's Justice League or the Avengers or something. And Roger Stern is writing that issue. I finished up the pencils a few weeks ago, and it's being inked by Sal Buscema and a gentleman named Chris Nye. It's been colored by Glenn Whitmore, who has been coloring all the Sid Comics work. He's been the regular colorist from the beginning. But Roger Stern has joined the crew. David Michelinie is working on a book for Sid Comics. In fact, he's working on Heroes Union #2. And Tom DeFalco is going to be doing some writing for Sid Comics. He's working on a character called Headhunter. So Darren Henry, the gentleman who is the creator and the editor-in-chief of Sid Comics, is doing the best he can to keep some of us guys employed. And, you know, he's using the guys that he remembers reading when he was a youngster. He was a big fan of 1970s Marvel Comics. And wants to keep, you know, Sal Buscema busy for as long as Sal Buscema wants to work. And, you know, the Dave Michelinies and the Roger Sterns and the Tom DeFalcos all have a place to go. So I'm really looking forward to the launch in August, and I'm hoping the more people we get to see the work, the more people will love the work. And I'm hoping that I'm able to retire doing comics for sidcomics.com. Sidcomics.net would be the place to go to kind of check out some of the titles. They're currently available on Comixology, and again, they're available through mail order through sidcomics.net. But come August, they'll be in every comic shop.
Ron,
that's good to hear. That's good to hear.
Blue Baron, I really this is my first time I saw this character. It's based like to George Washington, right?
The original Blue Baron was created during the Revolutionary War. Yes. He is a 300-year-old character, or is he? That kind of thing. But yeah, his design is based very much out of the Revolutionary War, although he is not a patriotic character per se. And the twist in the Blue Baron's own book is that he's this long-established superhero who, through this cosmic accident, switches minds with a 13-year-old kid who is now stuck in Blue Baron's body trying to make that work, and the Blue Baron is stuck in the 13-year-old kid's body trying to make that work. So it's kind of like Freaky Friday with superheroes, and it's been great fun. It's been a lot of fun to work on. In the Heroes Union #1, we get to see the real Blue Baron in action because Heroes Union #1 takes place before the body switch. So it's been a lot of fun. It's the scope of the new universe and the types of characters that he's doing are very, very current, very modern. His voice as a writer, Darren, has a terrific voice. There's a lot of humor to it, but a lot of high adventure to it, and it's a very modern voice. And I'm very, very happy to be here. It's very much in my wheelhouse. It's the kind of characters that we were talking about earlier that I like to do. Bright colors, the characters smile occasionally. You know, there's drama, there's pathos, there's risk, there's consequences, but it's a hopeful world of superheroes that are trying to make the world a better place. And those are the kinds of messages and those are the kind of stories that I like.
Good to hear. And we're reaching the end of the interview, but after the end, as I told you before, I want to show some cool stuff that you sketch. Not so cool, let's say, but awesome, like this.
Oh, that was a commission through Catskill Comics, where somebody asked for that classic scene done with the black costumes, and it was beautifully inked by Brett Breeding. Yes.
It's incredible. When I saw the pencils, and I like it. When it was inked by Brett, it was like,
yeah. Oh, he does incredible work.
Amazing, incredible work.
And he does his own commissions where he pencils and inks his own stuff, and it's every bit as fantastic. I mean, he doesn't really need a penciler anymore. I mean, he's doing wonderful work on his own. I'm jealous.
Here are some of the sketches you do.
Right. Yeah, the Superman Thor is actually fairly old. And, of course, the one in the middle is based on the back cover of the original Superman Spider-Man team-up.
Exactly.
And I just wanted to do the new suits and play with it a little bit. And yeah, the other one was a paid commission from somebody who likes Spider-Women and Spider-Girls. So.
Yeah.
Gotta ask you, what's the deal with the stripe on the back?
It's a little design element that I came up with. It just kind of makes it look a little more finished. It kind of anchors the characters without doing a background, without doing a complete background. It kind of just gives you something to kind of compare the characters to kind of, it feels more complete to me. It's kind of a background element without being a background. So it's just something I started doing, and I'm actually getting away from it a little bit now, and I occasionally come back to it. But yeah, it's just a design element that I use sometimes to help kind of tie everything together.
There's some more.
You know,
that one is you.
Yeah, actually, a gentleman asked for a self-portrait, so that's what I came up with. Because nobody really wants to see my face, so that's me on any given day, working at my studio, with all these characters waiting for me to wake up to actually so they can get busy. And then, of course, there's a Hobgoblin. So yeah, this was a series that I did that Brett Breeding inked for a commissioner who really liked the old Spider-Man Old and New poster that we did back in the 80s, and has asked for reimaginings of it with different characters, different Marvel characters from the time. So you know, there's like classic Hulk and the McFarlane Hulk. There's, you know, a couple of different Iron Mans.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, that's actually how I make a living now, along with sitcomics, is doing these kinds of commissions through catsgocomics.com. Gentleman named Scott Kress runs it and does a terrific job. This was just fun for me. They finally printed the plot from the Randy Schuler, the young man at the time who came up with the idea of the black suit.
Exactly.
And this is what he described in his plot as being his idea for the red suit. I played with it a little bit, but it was very different from what Marvel ended up doing with it. It was something that Reed Richards designed for him. It was made of unstable molecules. And Jim Shooter liked the idea of the black suit, so he bought the idea of a black suit for the going rate, and then put it on a shelf for a couple of years, and then used it for Secret Wars. But it was Mike Zeck who designed the black suit that Marvel used, and had no idea who Randy Schuler was when he did it. That kind of thing. But that was my little nod to what Randy Schuler's original description was.
Don't you think that the black suit was designed for artists who were tired of drawing Spider-Man's webbing
I've heard of that.
on the suit?
I can certainly understand why you would think that, but the simple fact is, if you really go and look at all the different artists who have drawn the black suit, more artists draw the webbing right than draw the white spider right. I mean, that spider, even Mr. Sal Buscema never drew that white spider very well. And there are some guys who draw the arms looking like lightning bolts and stuff. I mean, I don't think it's difficult, but you have a better chance of finding somebody who's able to draw the webbing really well than somebody who's able to draw that darn spider really well. So I don't know. There's a trade-off on either one.
So, Ron, we are ending with a question of the subscribers. We have only two questions.
Okay.
One is if you have worked with the Marvel method, and how was it? How did it work with you?
I strongly prefer the Marvel method. Even working for sitcomics, we use the Marvel method. So I have worked Marvel method more than I've ever worked full script. And I vastly prefer the Marvel method of working plot first. And it gives you more freedom, more creative freedom. And, like I said, I have worked full script. It's doable. It works. But I think if you're working with the right people, it's better. I mean, most comics these days, quite honestly, are done full script because we've gone through a generation of illustrators who never worked Marvel method and aren't comfortable with it. Not everybody is comfortable with it, but it's something I got comfortable with very quickly and really enjoy. Pat Olive prefers Marvel method, although he's very, very good working full script. So, I mean, I'm sure some people prefer full script because they feel more protected and they feel more like they're being told exactly what the writer wants. If I'm ever given a choice, I would rather work Marvel method. I would rather work plot first. But that's just my personal taste.
And the last one is, which work are you most proud of?
Wow. I may have to go to the they're all my children answer. Well, I said earlier, the kid who collects Spider-Man, I've always been very proud of that. Actually, that Superman Beyond issue that Mario held up before, I'm very proud of that single issue. I run the Amazing Spidergirl run when we relaunched as Amazing Spidergirl. I'm very proud of that run. A-Next, all the 12 issues of A-Next, I'm very proud of that. Those are some of my favorites of the stuff I've done. But you know, I worked on the Amazing Spider-Man. I got to work on Thor. I got to work on Superman. I've been a very, very blessed man. So it'd be very difficult for me to pick one job that I'm more proud of than anything else. If you put a gun to my head, I'd have to say the kid who collects Spider-Man.
Okay.
Ron, I really love this story. I really love it. I really love it because
we really, it was my first chance to work with Tom DeFalco on Superman. You know, for all the years for the couple of years that I got to work on Superman, I didn't get to work with Tom. I got to work with Dan Jurgens and I got to work with some of the other writers, but I didn't get to work with DeFalco. And so we got to have the same kind of conversations about Clark Kent that we used to have about Peter Parker. And, you know, he gave me some great ideas. I gave him some ideas, and we were writing an older Clark Kent, kind of dealing with middle age and dealing with loss. And Tom and I have both had our share of loss. So it was a very personal story for the two of us. And I was very happy with the way it came out. I would have loved to have done more with the character. And again, the story that had been done previously of Superman Beyond was a very dark story. It was a very depressing story. And we were asked by the editor to brighten things up a little bit. And again, as I said before, that's what we do. You know, that's what we're here for. We're here to make superheroes a much more positive force. And so we had great fun doing that with Superman.
yes, Ron, because I love it, the relationship he has with Batman, and also this young league of heroes.
Right.
And this was amazing. And also Superman saying, I'm going to use a phrase, it's not mine, it's from Roger Murdoch's Lethal Weapon. I'm too old for this. So it's amazing. So Superman, it's so human, that thing that I'm tired. So
he was tired. He was having to deal with the idea that maybe he wasn't as strong and fast as he used to be. So he had to be a little bit more careful. But he still had some good years left. He still had something to contribute. In the course of the story, he comes to realize that he still has something to contribute. And I'm glad you enjoyed the interaction with Batman, because that was one of my favorite parts of that whole thing, is that final scene. Because Tom and I were just able to channel our own friendship, and the way you joke with your old friends, but you can only do that with your old friends, you know. So yes, that was one of the scenes that I really enjoyed, was that final scene at Lois's grave. But there are many scenes in there that I was very, very happy with, and it was a lot of fun. It was great fun. And anytime I can work with Tom DeFalco and Sal Buscema, you're going to see a big smile on my face, because that's the best of all worlds. So.
Yes.
So, Mr. Frenz, we're gonna end the interview here. I really appreciate your kindness of answering every question we did, and for sharing this moment with us, because, as I said before, you there are unreachable for us in Argentina, and it's something that technology could bring us together and do this possible. And it's something that for me as a comic book fan that read your comic books and enjoy your art, it's a dream come true, this interview.
Wow. It's been a pleasure. Kyle and Mario, it's been a privilege, and I love it. I get a little uncomfortable just talking about myself, but I've enjoyed the questions, and thank you for the opportunity. It's been great, and continued luck to you in the on your channel. I think it's wonderful.
Thank you very much, sir. Mario.
Well, Ron, I am speechless. So thank you for this work of art, for Spider-Man, for all the stories that I enjoyed so much, and I still enjoy. So thank you so much, Ron, for this opportunity. I hope when this pandemic is over, you can come to Argentina in our conventions, please.
That would be lovely.
And
that would be lovely.
We are going to make an Argentinian barbecue, and you please sign me this with Norman Osborn behind.
It would be, Mario, please believe me. When I hear the fans talk about how much they enjoyed the work, when I say it was my pleasure, it really, truly was. I mean, I was a fan first, and to have the opportunity and the privilege to work on these characters and to have you guys appreciate it as much as you do, we're all here having fun. That's what it's all about. And it was a great pleasure for me, and I'm glad it was fun for you as well. So thank you very much, gentlemen. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Well, we're speaking in Spanish to say goodbye. Mario, nada, un placer como siempre. Ya está, nos vamos.
Ya está.
We're done with the legendary Ron Frenz.
So we're going to say something that the greatest man Stan Lee said. Enough said.
Así que, gente, muchísimas gracias. Dejen su like, por favor, suscríbanse al canal si no están. Y ya saben, voy a dejar acá en la descripción la página de Catskills que comenta Ron, para que puedan consultarla y puedan adquirir arte original de él.
Y los cómics nuevos
los cómics nuevos de Blue Baron. Así que muchísimas gracias, gente, y nos estamos viendo en el próximo programa de Protagonistas del Cómic.
Nos vemos.
Gracias y adiós.
Good night.
Bye.